We're going to talk about work and what piercings may be safe to make sure that you stay employed so you can get more piercings. Coming up next on Body Piercing Basics, episode number 92. So you should stick around. For those that are new to the channel, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and I operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So when I talk to you about these things, I'm talking about a level of expertise that comes with being in the body piercing industry for well over 26 years. So what we're going to talk about today is a really common question, concern, etc. that I encounter as a professional piercer on a regular basis. Why, it's either from the standpoint of someone flat out asking me whether or not it's going to affect their job, to people calling a few days after getting a piercing and saying I have to take this out. It's generally, if you ask people, especially if they're getting something re-pierced, why they took it out, and it's usually the number one thing that people mention. It was for a job. The second one being is my significant other didn't like it, which that drives me nuts. But that's another entire different topic. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through some things that you should probably think about if you're considering getting a visible piercing and you want to stay employed or you're starting your career. Piercings can limit your chances for employment, and it can reduce the amount of income that you are capable of making. It can affect your ability to advance in the career that you have. You can kind of hit this ceiling, some would refer to it as glass, where they are not going to put you in a managerial position or one of authority because you have visible piercings. This can affect what jobs you are allowed to do if you have a visible piercing. For example, if part of the place that you work at is dealing with the general public, they might not allow you to do that. It may keep you in the back, hidden, away from viewing eyes of their clientele. It may require you to move to another city to find a place that you can work at in the career that you like, that's going to accept your modifications, either your piercings or tattoos or what have you. This is a very distinct possibility because it varies greatly from area of the world to area of the world. Urban areas sometimes are a little bit more lenient, some are not. It really, really can depend on your location of whether or not certain piercings are going to be acceptable or they're not going to be acceptable and going to keep you employed. Also, you should consider your career. When you're choosing your career, if you are a heavily modified person or do want to continue to be heavily modified, and being visibly modified is a part of your life and your personality, you really want to consider possibly finding a career in which it is acceptable. Whether it be the arts, whether it be self-employment, whether it be consultation, or maybe working from home or something that you can do to make a decent income and feel fulfilled and not hit that kind of like, yeah, I work this job that I feel like an underachiever and I don't understand why I'm not going to the next level. You need to pick a career where it's going to be acceptable. Now, kind of one thing you do want to consider is there are different levels of employment and different levels of what's going to be acceptable and what's not acceptable. I like to use the restaurant example. For example, you have at the bottom tier, you have fast food. This would be any national chain that serves hamburgers or Taco Bell or McDonald's, Burger King. They're going to be more acceptable for you to have piercings. You might be able to move up to like night manager. You may have problems exceeding beyond that, but they're going to be fairly, hey, you've got two hands and a brain, so we're going to put you to work. The next level would be what I refer to as counter service. These are places like Panchero or Noodles & Co. it's not really a restaurant, but it's not really fast food. There's a better quality. This one, they might hire you, but they're probably not going to give you a lot of managerial situations in the future. Next level would be casual dining. This would be things like Perkins, Denny's, family restaurants like Applebee's, and places of that nature. These places are probably possibly going to hire you if you have limited amount of piercings or piercings that aren't very visible. That you might be able to get away with maybe a couple of odd ear piercings. But if you have a visible septum piercing, they aren't going to hire you. It's kind of that middle of the road. Also, either you're going to be less likely to advance in their organization as far as management, et cetera, because they don't want to have a manager that has all these visible piercings because they won't be able to reinforce this in their in the lower rank and file of employment. The next level would be kind of the national chain. You should probably wear a shirt with a collar kind of thing. I don't know exactly what to call them. This would be places like P.F. Chang's and Red Lobster, maybe. It's a little higher end than the family restaurant, but not by much. This is kind of in that same little vein, but because they're corporate owned, they're going to have very strict policies, more than likely, on a national or worldwide level of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And often these are very conservative as far as any visible piercings on your face or the number of piercings you can have in your ears. The next level would be casual fine dining. These are usually locally run restaurants. You're dealing with people of an upper income level. Usually they're people that are expecting a better experience they're going to find at, the P.F. Chang's, and they are going to be more prejudiced towards piercings. They're going to be more like, I don't want to be served by a guy that has a septum piercing. I don't want to be served by a guy that has an eyebrow piercing. Did that girl really have all those piercings there? It's part of the experience, and it's part of whether or not you're going to get hired is going to be a flip of the coin, because a lot of these places, they're really looking at what that overall experience is going to be, and there's a level of expectation that is to a point where they're going to find piercings distracting and need to be avoided. Then you get into the really expensive fine dining. This area, you're probably not going to find too many people with heavily visible piercings of any type. Once again, it's kind of like casual dining. On another level, there is a level of expectation. When you're spending $200, $300 a plate, they're not going to want to have somebody that works there that is off-putting in any way, shape, or form. They want people that pretty much are silent, non-personalities, that their service is basically they're there when you need them and they're not when you don't, and you don't even notice it. That's like the highest end. Now, the reason why I bring this up is it will affect the income. If you think about it, if you are, let's just say we're all waiting tables or working at the counter at a fast food restaurant, you're going to make not really great. You're probably going to make minimum wage if you're lucky. You might get a quarter an hour raise or 10 cents an hour in about 4 years of working there. And then you might move up to management. You might become like the store manager and make, just above the poverty line. But it's not going to bring you in a lot of income. There's not a lot of room for advancement. And you're always going to hit a level where it's like, well, this is as far as I can go with this one. With counter service, it's kind of the same thing. You're just going to hit a level where you're not going to be able to make enough money, and you're going to have to look elsewhere. I would say with casual dining and that corporate casual dining or borderline fine dining stuff, these really, the money is in the management. If you can't excel and move up that ladder, then you're not going to make the money that you would like to make to be healthy and pay your bills. The other thing is you may not even be employable as far as they're concerned due to their strictness in dress code and etc. However, if you get into this, you're going to make a little bit more money than you're going to be in counter service or fast food. And when we get into like the next 3 levels up to fine dining, a lot of your income is going to depend on tips. And you have to consider if somebody's paying $200 for a meal and they usually tip 15%, that's a $30 tip on one table. If they're in a casual dining place, they're going to pay maybe, I don't know, like 2 people, tops $30 with appetizers and everything else. They're going to tip you 15% of that, which is going to be $3. So it greatly affects your ability to have income if you cannot move on to that next level of your career or whatever you do for a job. Now let's talk about some things you should consider when choosing a piercing or thinking about employment with your piercing. First one is that for one reason or another, at least in Western society, piercings on females is more socially acceptable than on males. It's sadly the reality. A guy with both his ears pierced is going to be less accepted as a female with the same thing because as a society, we have decided that women wear jewelry, men really don't. Is it fair? Is it right? No, probably not. And will that change over time? I hope so. The next thing is that large stretched piercings are going to be a lot less acceptable than things that aren't. If you have just a simple, 18 or 16 gauge Libre stud with like a silver ball on it or maybe a small gem setting, that's going to be a lot more accepted than a 3/4 inch or 5/8 inch hollow plug that is stretched out in your ear. The next thing is multiple piercings are also going to be more or less acceptable than single piercings. I had clients that have had issues because they have more than 2 sets of earlobe piercings at certain businesses. It's just not acceptable. They would not allow them advancement. They told them if they wanted to move ahead in this business, they had to take at least one of those sets out. So do consider that. And this comes down to ears a lot, nostrils. If you have 2 of them, that's not going to be as acceptable as having just one. You should always consider that. The next thing is that the type of jewelry you're wearing in it. For example, if I took all these rings out of here and maybe put studs in there or even probably plugs, people are not going to notice it as quickly. It's going to be a little bit more acceptable, and it's going to be less in your face, less bold. Generally, if you have jewelry that's more subtle, smaller, doesn't stick out as much, a good example would be if you have a nostril piercing, is if you have a stud in it instead of a ring, people are going to be a little bit more accepting of that than they would if you had a ring in it. Next thing is that more extreme piercings, or what is generally society considers more extreme piercings, are going to be less acceptable than more kind of medium road average piercings. A good example of this would be maybe an upper ear cartilage piercing. That might be okay, but if you have a 12 gauge industrial helix to helix piercing on the top of your ear, that's probably not going to be okay. People are going to notice that more readily. People are going to think, ooh, that hurts. That you're going to have more of that reaction. Now, is that just society? That is just basically the way society looks at it, and not everybody's going to be that way. Usually most people are just really curious, but it will affect your employment and your advancement if you have these large visible piercings that are more on the extreme level than just kind of more subtle piercings. The next thing to consider is how noticeable the piercing is. I kind of already alluded to this, but like, for example, can the piercing be covered up with clothing? Is it an ear piercing and you have long hair so you can kind of cover it up and it's not noticeable? When you're picking your jewelry, you should think about this too. I just kind of went over that, is a stud's going to be less noticeable than a ring. People are not going to, it doesn't ring the same bells because it's not as visible. The last thing you want to think about is how socially acceptable that particular piercing is at that moment in time. Here's the deal. If you would have asked me, let's say 15 years ago, if a nostril would affect employment, I would probably have said yes, definitely it will. Now I would be a little less. I'd basically tell you it depends on what you're getting for a job. It has become so socially acceptable to have that piercing, almost to the point where it's very difficult to go anywhere without seeing but someone with at least one nostril piercing, that it's more socially acceptable. So it's going to be something you might be able to get away with in many professional jobs. Now, a lip piercing, a Medusa, an eyebrow piercing, probably not. So the more socially accepted and the less people think of it as an extreme piercing, the better, the less it's going to affect employment. Here's some things, there are some hints on piercings that are going to be probably safe at work or safe in most situations. The thing I always tell people is if you have an employee manual, read it. Read the dress code section. That's usually where they will hide any regulations they have on piercing. Also, talk to anybody that's above you in management. If you are just entering a career, you may want to talk to people that are in that industry beforehand about what's generally accepted and what's not generally accepted. But here's some go-to piercings that will probably not affect employment that much. First one being the most obvious one, anything that's below the neck. Basically, if it isn't visible in normal work attire, it's not going to affect employment. Now, we're talking about things like nipple piercings, navel piercings, male and female genital piercings. Most people will never have a clue that you even have them unless, of course, you're unclothed in front of them or you tell them. So it won't affect employment at all. As far as ear piercings that should be safe at work, of course, earlobe piercings are generally pretty accepted. Upper ear cartilage piercings, I would say also. For some reason, Dave's and conchas, mainly because they're kind of hidden inside the ear, don't seem to be something that triggers people as much. Generally, people don't even notice them. That's one of the reasons why I like those two piercings. They can be very subtle or they can be very bold. It's kind of up to you, and it really depends on the jewelry you wear. Also in the ear, of course, anything that's in the flat area generally will not be noticed and set up alarms right away. And it varies from person to person and who you're encountering. It's just life. As far as facial piercings, number one, no, hands down, septum piercings, because you can buy a retainer or you can flip the jewelry up with a circular barbell. You can create a situation where at work, no one even sees it unless they're looking directly up your nose and pretty much looking for it. As I mentioned earlier, nostrils have become extremely more socially acceptable than they once were, but it's still kind of a question mark. And it really depends as far as what type of jewelry you wear in it. Small studs, usually okay. Large rings, not so okay. Multiple nostril piercings, not really okay. High nostrils, not really okay. So you really have to kind of consider what is going to be more of that subtle, classic look opposed to something that's a little bit more extreme. Now, oral piercings. With these, tongue piercings, and that's kind of up in the air. If you're one of those people that talks with your mouth really wide open, people are going to notice it. People notice mine all the time, and I'm a close talker. I tend to close my mouth when I'm talking. That's why my mother always said I mumbled, which is hilarious. But it's the only oral piercing that isn't directly in view at all times. Venom piercings, possibly the same issue. Of course, I don't advise doing things like snake eyes and all the surf scoops and all that nonsense. It's the only two that you can kind of hide. Now, any lip piercing or anything else or anything that's done outward out of the mouth is going to be highly noticeable. I don't care what you wear in it. I have had clients in the past that would take the ends off of labret studs and seem to be able to get away with it, but that really depends on your employer. You know, some people will put up with it, some people won't. So, I hope you learned something. I hope it's been helpful. I hope, if you're starting a new career or you're looking for a job or you're just getting into piercing and you're thinking about how is this going to affect my employment, I hope this was helpful. If you did find it helpful, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Let me know that you liked it because I like it when you like it. If you have any questions, concerns, what have you, questions, comments, things to add, go ahead and make a comment. I usually answer them if I have time. If you like merch, you like T-shirts, you like fanny packs, anything that has to do related to body piercing and tattooing, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. There's also one of those merch bars. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay clean, and stay healthy. We'll see you next time.